everybody, I'm Cody.
And I'm Brent.
And we are the Hugonauts, here to review and discuss for you the best sci-fi novels of all time, and sometimes interviews with authors, or just fascinating people from the sci-fi space. Like this week, we have Seth Fishman, who is a literary agent. We know it was supposed to be an interview with Becky Chambers, but unfortunately Becky had a personal thing. We're still going to have the episode, probably release it in the new year. We just needed to reschedule, and we're still stoked about that, but and stoked about this episode with Seth, which Brent's going to tell us a little bit about Seth.
Yeah, this happened because we've been thinking for a while about like how to sort of take a look behind the curtain of like the publishing industry and how to find out, who decides what books, we all end up getting to see, and, how the award ceremony, processes work behind the scenes, and like how to find the subgenres, that we really care about. And in the course of, doing the show and just thinking about sci-fi, like every time I ever looked up like who some great sci-fi writer's agent was, I felt like the answer like kept being Seth Fishman. So couldn't think of a better person to talk to about all that kind of stuff. He is a VP and agent for Hugonauts, and represents Leckie, Cixin Liu, Robinette Kowal, Becky Chambers, Mur Lafferty, Ray Naylor, River Solomon, Djeli Clark. That's not even the end of his sci-fi and fantasy list at all. Plus people in other genres as well, but really prolific, incredible agent with like really great insight into how things work behind the scenes of the science fiction publishing industry. So, and then he also writes some YA and children's books, so he knows about writing himself as well. So really excited to talk with him.
Yeah, Seth's a fascinating person. And also another announcement, we're going to take a bit of a holiday break this year. I got married in August. I am about
wedding.
To go. Yeah, Brent was invited. And then, so I'm going to go on my honeymoon next week, Southeast Asia for a few weeks. Just in general, the podcast takes some time. The show takes some time. I have a lot of sound design, post-production, score work to catch up on. Brent's got some stuff.
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, I got obsessed with brain-computer interfaces and the potential of that technology to particularly improve the lives of people with disabilities. Anyway, I recently started working in a UCLA research lab on that. So, it'll be good to like invest heavily in that here for a minute as I get into that new space.
Yeah, so we got some stuff going on, but we are going to release one special episode during the holiday break.
Yeah, we couldn't stay away entirely.
We couldn't resist. Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, which we're really excited to talk about. So there'll be one treat floating in the mists, and then we're really going to get back into it in the new year. And we have a lot of exciting ideas we're kind of gestating right now on how to expand. So thanks for being with us, as always.
Yeah, one quick ask for all of you. One of the things we're thinking about doing over the break, we're definitely setting up a website where it'll be easier to see some of the written content and sort of the connections between all these books that we sort of map out and showing how they're related to each other. Another thing we've been thinking about is setting up a Discord server so that we can actually like all talk with each other about these books. If you would be interested in that, please let us know. Either shoot us an email at hugonautspodcast@gmail.com, or send us a DM or respond on Twitter or Instagram, or comment on the YouTube video. Any of the current ways of getting a hold of us. But let us know if you would want to participate in a Discord server and if that would be interesting. Because if we can all sort of like talk together somewhere, that would be really fun. But if there's not going to be a lot of users, it's maybe doesn't make sense to do. So anyway, let us know if that sounds great and we'll get it set up.
Yeah. Well, without further ado, here is Seth Fishman to talk about the sci-fi literary universe and beyond.
Welcome, Seth. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, so are we.
Yeah.
So are we. We're going to launch right into it with a question about publishing in the sci-fi verse. What kind of stories are selling in sci-fi these days, and what are publishers looking for? Why? Is this even a good way to frame this question, or is it silly and it's all one shot?
No, no. That's not silly. I think that it's the question that everyone asks, right? What should I be writing? What I want to write? Should I be looking towards what the industry wants? And this, a book I sell today probably comes out in 12 months, or nowadays in 18 months because of COVID delays and whatnot. But we're looking for, books that say something beyond just, base cool SF concepts, and also issue-driven points, but rather finds us in new worlds. And I know that seems obvious. We're always trying to be in new worlds, but it's amazing how sort of dull and reread a lot of the stuff that we see on submission is. So I think that's probably the easiest way of a very complicated answer to give to you. I do think that every once in a while you head in certain directions, like, once Martha Wells, Murderbots were working, then I think there was a small shift in the direction of funny, dark, funny, light, funny kind of stuff. But humor is really hard, and so I'm always hesitant to answer this question all the way, because the truth of the matter is, anything that comes across my desk that's good, I want to read it, and I don't care if it's all personal, right? Like, I have no interest in zombies because I just don't like zombies. But if you give me a vampire, I don't care. I'll read it and love it and be happy with it if it's good, and then and try and create like what publishers are wanting to buy, if that makes sense. I will say horror also seems to be something that is on the uptick right now. But yeah, that roundabout answer. I hope that's helpful.
No, that's definitely helpful. I guess, is there like a hit? So there's not really like a hit list of, we think based on all these submissions we've been getting, based on the slush pile, like, it seems like everyone wants to write about X right now. So let's find the best version of X, because this might be the next thing. Or is it's just like, if it's good, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there is something going on in the SF publishing world where we're shifting more towards bigger hit status books. And I think that is, I would say, probably pretty scary. One of the great things about the SF publishers, and there's very few of them, which is part of this problem, is that they were always willing to take chances on new concepts and new writers. Unfortunately, the side effect of that means that those chances were very low advances, and sometimes very little marketing publicity support behind those things. But in doing so, they allow for a number of more voices to exist in this world, and the community is pretty loud. They'll support each other, and nowadays I do think the shift is a little bit more towards bigger hits. And Del Rey's been there for a long time. They do what they do very well, but they take almost no creative chances. It doesn't mean they don't have amazing books. I'm not trying to say that. I'm friends with a lot of the editors there, and I would be happy to have a book published there. But, they're aiming to swing for the fences pretty much every time. And I think that places like Tor, which have traditionally not been that way, are shifting a little bit more that way. And some of it's a lack of personnel, and some of it's a strategic aim and a direction. And so I think that is a different answer as well. But, the small, quiet book, the overly complicated books that SF sometimes live in, that then become very successful, often would have a harder time succeeding, I suppose. Yeah.
Small, quiet books. What would you call a small, quiet book? What is that?
Well, I represent across genres. So, the literary version of that is like.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'll start there, just because I think it's a lot of ways it's a little easier. Is like the person going to college, and then their parent died, and they had to go home and find out what their will is. That's a really basic, usually often small, unless that could be big, I guess. But in the SF space, we're talking about, I don't know, like I rep Becky Chambers. Would Becky Chambers' first book, Long Way, would that be published now? Would that have been bought now? Maybe. It doesn't mean that there isn't an appetite for that. Obviously, there is an appetite for that.
I mean, wasn't it already? She had to self-publish that thing and prove it for herself already, didn't she?
Yeah, and I guess the traditional home publisher of hers is Hodder, which is out of the UK, which is very rare because no one in the States took that risk. But I mean, I think you can think about that in a number of different ways, and I think that that's an example. The risk books are a little bit harder. And I represent a number of people who are, or risk books, and then there's also other trends like, I rep the Three Body Problem series, and after that, there was a big run on translated authors, specifically Chinese. Otherwise there are others, but I felt it pretty quickly that there was a limit. We have our one author along those lines, and sometimes the translation was a problem. Like there were legitimate reasons that a book might not get picked up in the States, but that's why Clark's World is doing so great, that they're continuing to sort of allow translated works to have a moment to shine. But I think that's just to basically say in publishing, for everything new that's starting, there's a shutdown, and right now there's just a understanding that the big hits create sort of bigger money, right? And some publishers will head that way. It's not all the time. Obviously, there's exceptions to all these rules, but yeah, that's my take on that. It's not a specific subject. It's just sort of bigger concept.
Yeah,
concept.
Totally. The epic versus the everyday, just character driven. And speaking of that, is there a place you would suggest for people to find, to go look for more books that they're interested in their kind of, their specific subgenre or their type of story they're interested in, other than just, it's Goodreads and it's like, the Audible stars and ratings and stuff like that? Like, would you suggest going to the publisher sites?
Publishers who like play a lot in certain subgenres, yeah.
So this, I want to be clear, the sci-fi community is very different than most of publishing, and it's very fan-based. It's very like a book that fails in the literary space, and we won't get into the literary versus SF, like even the terms.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
No, we talk about that a lot too.
But in the literary space, like, can fail. Like, you could spend $200,000, a publisher could spend $200,000 on a book, and it can sell, 200, 500 copies. The failure mark in the SF space, which is usually for much smaller advances, it's usually higher. Like, people come to the table, they support publishers a little bit better, the word of mouth is better, people care about each other as a community better. And so I think that that's also an advantage in terms of these things. I think that people really do follow a set of word of mouth within the community very well. And I think that's where you find what you're looking for. And it's, I'm not always a big fan of saying, go spend money and go to cons or something like that. But I think that there's a lot to be, a lot of camaraderie and a lot of great learning and reading and connectivity heading to some of these conventions when they're local, because I think you'll be able to really understand what's great. And then I think that going to the bookstore as well, I know that's so basic, but the stores that are tailored towards the SF community, just the knowledge that exists there is beyond, and it's just so wonderful. And sometimes, sometimes it's just about inevitability. Like, I have heard I've known Fond du Lis for a long time, heard of the series, but never read it. Didn't have time, I missed my window. And I recently played, a game that Dan Wells played, ran as a master. My first RPG game, actually, I missed all this. And it was based in that world build. And the number of people that were like, I can't wait for you to read this for the first time. You're so lucky that you get the chance to read that, was amazing. And it made me excited about getting to read this thing. And so I still firmly believe that it's about, like, what are the echo chambers of your community that gets you excited about a book. Now, obviously, you're going to miss a number of projects along those lines. But what's great is, in the SF world as well, as the short stories is where you can find a lot of those things. Like, if you looked at the Asimov's the Reader Choice Awards that just came out right now, one of my clients, Ray Naylor, got second in two of the categories and got first in one of them. And I don't know if you know who Ray Naylor is. I don't know. But if you can see that, you can say, people seem to like him. He's pretty good. And then you can notice that he has a novel that came out 2 weeks ago, called Mountain and the Sea. And it's, to me, it's one of the best debuts I've read in forever. And it's a crossover SF, but it's friggin' amazing. And I can't recommend it enough, and I really hope you get a chance to read it. And I think that one of the things that really helps in this community is those other avenues of communication. And I think that's where you can find those things better than in other places. Like, good, like, audio is a very weird thing because audio really values length and price, and sometimes the reader, which it should, over the content of the book, right? So you're not finding a real fair.
I think that's part of like the Brandon Sanderson appeal. My brother's like a huge Brandon Sanderson guy, and I think part of the reason that started is my brother has a job where he listens to audiobooks while he works, and he buys them. He's like, oh, great, these books are 40 hours. Like, I get great value for my money. I'm a huge Brandon Sanderson fan. And now, of course, lots of people love Brandon Sanderson crossover. But yeah, I think you're totally right that like audiobooks have changed some of the ways people come to this. Whereas like when I'm picking up a book, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to pick this up. Like, that's too much.
Yeah, it's very fair. It's very interesting. I mean, I'm all about trying to figure out audio right now because publishers pay their readers so little, and they just don't. They're just not creative and smart about the way they do audio. And agents long ago sort of lost the control of the audio rights, and that was a real. I mean, the weakest link agents lost that battle for everyone, and it was we fought it until we lost it, and it's really a shame. But I represent some self-published.
Could you summarize that for our listeners a little bit? Because we've heard about this, but in general, basically, there's just if you sell a book, you're selling the book rights too, or the audio rights too. And there's just no way to undo that. Right?
That is about 99.9% correct. Yeah, there's a few audio and ebook rights in the span of my career, which is not short. I mean, I've been doing this for 17 years, but in the span of my career, have gone to publishers. And the ebook rights going there makes sense, but the royalty rates is way too low. It's completely inappropriate, and there's no way to change that unless you're in the 1% and you can argue for a higher number, or you're at a smaller publisher that's willing to play that game. And the audiobook, you really can't play that game either. Everyone demands it. And there is a real robust market for audio originals, which allows you to sort of, play to certain publishers that are outside of the big five, like Audible or Podium or something, and do some originals. And that's something. And then some places like Tor.com will allow you occasionally for novellas to keep those rights, which I find to be extraordinarily valuable, and one of the reasons why I do business with Tor.com. But you lose those rights, and so like I just took on a self-pub author named Matt Dinneman, which is fantasy. It's a lit RPG. His first book is called Dungeon Crawler Carl. The audio books is insane. I mean, the books are incredible. The audiobooks are insane, and they did well enough that they hit the bestseller list. The book 5 did when it came out. It got all these pre-orders, and it was this huge thing. But one of the things is that the reader, Jeff Hayes, reads 350 voices. Like he's just like this. He's just a genius, and it's worth doing it. And also he makes these things so long, and it's insane. So, but there's also beyond that, like Podium, when they publish their audiobooks, they'll charge up to $90 for them because they don't. You're not buying your audiobook. You're buying your audiobooks most of the time with a credit, not with a dollar amount.
Right.
And so that is like cheating Amazon and making more money for them and for the author. But it's also kind of weird and gross.
Wait, hold on. That works. They can just tell Amazon, like, yo, this costs you $90. And if Amazon chooses to put it on the Audible, somebody uses a credit, Amazon has to give them $90? Yeah.
Well, not $90. They have to give them probably 70% of that is usually what that marks out at.
That's wild. Interesting.
Am I wrong about that 70%? Whatever. The point is that, you price it at that point. And that's how it goes. Yeah. So, but it's the game. The games are afoot in the audio space. It's weird. There's something to be had there, right?
Yeah.
So we went off topic, but yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, it's still kind of the Wild West, the audiobooks that totally makes sense. And in lit, I mean, it just sounds like, like everything else in the entertainment space going the way that music went first, which is, you got to publish on these streaming platforms, and, you don't have that much negotiating power unless you're, Beyonce or Taylor Swift or someone who's big. You just kind of have to do it because that's what everyone's doing, and otherwise you're not going to get heard. You're not going to get seen.
Yeah, I live in a world where I advocate for traditional publishing, and I still want to be able to provide that for my clients. And I think everyone should go that route, actually. I mean, it doesn't mean that that self-publishing isn't the best way forward for a lot of people or individual things. What I mean is the ideal. But the ideal is harder and harder to land now. And so when that happens, then it's our job for me to stay relevant, it's my job to be able to find ways to either integrate other things into the traditional publishing or to be able to look elsewhere and help your clients out that way. Otherwise, we're just going to lose everyone. And why do people go to traditional publishing? It's a lot of it's ego, right?
Right.
A lot of it's ego. Because you can probably make more money sometimes in other realms, and you're not going to make much money most of the times in publishing anyways, and for a while. So there's it has to be worth something, and these publishers have to be wary that they're losing their own value in my mind unless you're in that top percent.
Yeah.
One thing I tell a lot of authors or a lot of people is that you're your own business, so you have to. It's sort of unfair because you're not necessarily a business person. You're a writer, but when you hire an agent, you're hiring someone to work for you, like basically a CEO or whatever that might be. So you need to find someone who can think about the 360 world around you and how best to push your stuff forward. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Who knows all this stuff but you? Here's all the things we could try.
Obviously, I'm pro agents. Right. I think we're worth our percentage, probably just
huge surprise.
Contracts alone. Yeah, I know, huge surprise. Of course. But I think we're more important than the editor. I mean, a lot of people have this romantic relationship, thought that their editors, they're going to be their shining star. But, a lot of editors go to other jobs. To be fair, in the SF space, they stick around a little bit longer. But a lot of them, in order to get promotions, they move to different places. So,
Yeah.
So it's
Makes
hard
sense.
to have a long relationship with an editor. If you stay at a publisher, it's hard to actually have the same editor for many years.
Right. Yeah. And again, I'm willing to say that SF is a little bit better. I know a number of people that stick around. Why? Because there's not many other places to go to. But you can't just lock SF into this. Like one of the things that is, into these 5 publishers, like one of my specialties is crossover. Like my literary authors, most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them can be considered speculative, right? Like you think about Station 11, that's an SF book told in a literary way with tropes that are like very familiar and old and sort of boring for a lot of us in the SF space, but new to another community. Midnight Library, one of the best-selling books in the last 2 years, is like so obvious to all of us what's going on there, and again, boring, but it's told in a really accessible way with a good title, quick chapters, blah blah blah, published by Viking. And these crossover things, like what I love is working with those people and saying, well, this is like helping them create something that's new for everyone all the way around. That's that Ray Naylor book I was telling you about, Daryl Gregory, Spoonbenders, heading from Tor over to Knopf, or River Solomon is over at MCD FSG with Saarland, and I love having these crossovers. And so it's not just that, right? You have the opportunity to sort of expand beyond like what is the narrow scope that we live in. And it's not about changing the way that you write necessarily. Sometimes it's just about recognizing what you have.
We actually did an episode on Station 11 to try to widen the spectrum of like what could be considered sci-fi, because Station 11. So great example. And to transition into some writer stuff. There's a feel in like a series, in a trilogy or longer, where the books after the first book often have like a different feel or vibe than the first book. You can feel that it's different. And we're wondering if that is because an author gets, 10 to 20 years to write the first book, and then it gets so popular that the next books come out like next year and the year after that and whatever. Do you think that's a balance of, is that a publishing demand thing to ride the hot streak?
You hit the nail on the head. The series there's something in the zeitgeist right now about series. There's also a lot of conversations about whether people should do series and, how, because there's a downward trajectory in sales for all of them. And I think series are really interesting and tricky. Like we all love series. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. You're absolutely right. The first book, and this is not just series. The first book is often great because you don't have that demand and timeline. And whether you're writing a series or not, publishers want you to produce a book quickly, or at least, you know, ideally they like a book a year or a book every 2 years. And when you think about, actually, when you go back to self-publishing, that's the funny thing, the dichotomy between the shift between the two is like, you know, if you're a self-published person, they complain all the time that publishers don't publish quick enough. And then there's a whole nother group of people that think that there's a demand to publish too quickly, right? And they don't have the time to put it in. And I will say that's probably one of the bonuses of the literary space, is that there's a lot more breathing room for you to be able to, you know, in the literary world, you're allowed to take more time in between. But those editors want those books out quicker too. It's just sort of the norm is established. But I think you're right. I think it's very obvious that, like, when you have 1 year to produce something, especially when we're talking about longer form fiction, you know, that is cresting 100,000 words, it's hard to pop that out in that period of time, especially now with the longer lead time you need in production to be, you know, I'm still getting books being pushed back because they're stuck in the port or because of printing issues, and, you know, and the publishers are extraordinarily understaffed. And that means every step of the way needs more time in order to get things done. I've had books sold where an editor didn't give me responses for a year, despite like all the, you know, drum banging that you can do, because there's only one editor in that space at that publisher. So like this stuff is, you know, there's all these things happening here, and you can always, like, I will say that the most flexible thing is the due date, right? It's in a contract, so you can't pretend that it doesn't exist. But that's definitely the most flexible. If the book's not done, it's not good and not ready, you can always, like, everyone wants it to be good, right? But what you don't want to do is self-sabotage, right? You don't want to launch a book in-house, get enthusiasm for it, get sales like lining up. I don't mean pre-orders, but like orders from bookstores and stuff going, and then have to push it for any reason, right? So, and because you need a lot of time for that to happen, that needs to be decided really early. And there's the challenge. There's all these issues that happen because of the lead time, right? Sometimes you want to hire your own publicist, but when you know that you need to do that is usually too late, because that's when the publisher is like failing you, and that's going to be 6 weeks out, maybe even earlier. So you're in a tricky position with publishing. You have to make decisions very early. And with series, it's the same kind of thing. But I do think it's fascinating. I think we all know that if you can pop out a book where it's publishing one every 6 months, and regardless of the length, like, that's probably still your ideal, but publishers aren't going to allow that to happen, and you're not going to be able to write that at that speed, and you know, most of the time. So
some can, but not a lot.
Some can. Yeah. It's so fascinating. But I will say that that's one of the reasons why it's much better for those people to be in self-publishing or to diversify, which is one of the reasons why I diversify, because if you're writing that fast, like my client Django Wexler, then I'm like, well, Django, give me a middle grade series and we can do that at the same time, so that you're not competing with your own publisher, because the publisher can't handle it. They can't. They don't know what to do with it. Unless you're really, really, really big for them. And then they're like, oh, yes, please. But even still, they're like, well, how do we do this, right? Let's juggle and figure out around it. They're not going to be able to handle it.
Right.
So it's tricky. We're just in a tricky spot. So that's why sometimes I think with series, or when people say to me, they come to me, there's this line that are in pitches that's everywhere that like hit the zeitgeist 3 or 4 years ago, which was, I'm submitting a standalone with series potential. It's a great line, whoever came up with it, right? But I don't know. What if you just stand by your guns and you give me whatever you actually are giving me, and then we have a strategy around that, and that's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that. It's actually the waffling is some of the issues. And I think you really need to be able to have a 360 view and thought process about what your book is. If it's a standalone, then it's a standalone. If it does well and there's room for it to be more, and your mind's about that a little bit, and you have some avenues along those lines, that's great. And you can expand it and go from there. But it's going to be less of a book if it's a standalone that actually has serious potential, but it just is a one-off, right?
Sort of definitionally, you're not finishing. You're either closing all the threads and the sequel's going to be weird, or you're not closing all the threads and it is not a standalone. It can't be the best of.
You're splitting the baby.
Yeah.
Does
100%. And also, like, people love series. You can still go for it, but you just have to realize there's a risk, right?
Right.
Yep. So one thing that we would love to hear about, I think for for many people, the way they, hear about new interesting genre books is from award lists, right? Whether that be Hugos, Nebulas, Locus, whatever award you like. I think getting on one of those award lists obviously helps a lot more people hear about the books, right? And so I'm very curious to hear from inside the industry, how do you think books end up getting talked about and getting onto those award lists? Are there like book award campaigns the way there are for movies and Oscars?
Yeah.
Or very curious to hear how you think a book sort of starts to end up on one of those short lists.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the good news is that you're right. Like, those award lists really do matter. I know when the Nebulas and the Hugo long list land, and take a gander at what's up there, and that's the way of it. The bad news is that it is a bit of an echo chamber, and that it is a popularity contest of some sort. And a lot of books get nominated and win over and over because they're just who they are. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily bad authors, but sometimes it's sort of, like they just stay on these lists, right? They're always going to be there when they're, and that's why you see a number of the big authors sometimes sort of kindly rejecting their nominations to let others have their opportunities. But there is a war. I mean, it's not, the campaigning is not like we're throwing money down that I know of. I bet some people do some ads and good on them. I mean, it's probably worth it, to be honest.
Right.
But also the good news is that that's there, right? That's a doable thing. There's actually a path. You write a good short story and you are in the community and you're a supportive, happy member. And I think happy really does matter because, there's a lot of toxicity in this world.
Nobody likes a grouch.
Exactly. Yep. Then you can find yourself, on a ballot. And once you're on a ballot, then you can remain on a ballot with future things if you pop them out. And that can be your thing, right? And you can make your way forward. It doesn't always translate to success. It often translates to success in a book deal. It doesn't always translate to success of that book because there's still like a smaller number of people at a certain level, but you can get there. And people often say a lot, especially publishers, the Hugos and the Nebulas don't matter in terms of book sales or whatever. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah, there's just no way.
There's no way. And it's not even, it doesn't necessarily mean like a huge spike necessarily. That's not what we're talking about. But we are talking about awareness of you as an author, bookstore orders, library orders, just foreign rights deals alone matter, for an author if you win one of these major awards. So it really is, in my mind, it's a pretty clear path. Now, mind you, in some ways it's a Machiavellian path in a kind of way, in a not as negative way, but it is there. And I think it's great.
Well, if it didn't matter, then every single book that was nominated or won wouldn't have that printed on the book jacket and the cover art.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So lots of our listeners are writers as well. It's not the majority, but a fair number of our listeners do write. And so, of course, we got to ask you the question that I think any aspiring writer wants to ask an agent, which is, do you have any advice for the people who, are out there, they love sci-fi, they're writing something, but they're not, they haven't sold anything yet. What would you tell them?
I have too much. There's too much. There's but a lot of the cliches are real. This is an industry of failure, of rejections. It's a weird one where you can have a good rejection. It's like one of the few. And I think that it's okay to remember that writing is like exercising, right? You need, or sports, like you need to work on it to get better. And you should have a drawer book. I think you should be okay with letting that book go, that you're working on for 10 years and working on something else. And if you didn't get pulled back to it, that's fine. But that's okay. And also, there's just so many things. A lot of, don't listen to everyone, including me. It's sort of like having a baby where there's all these books in there. They're pulling in different directions and they're still like the right way of doing it. All the cover letter stuff, you can type my name into YouTube and find me doing an hour long telling you how to write a query letter and all this stuff. There's rules and all these things, but what is the query letter really about? It's really just about getting someone to turn the page to the book. Everything's about getting back to the book, and the book just has to be good. And and then you'll get there. So if you write that good book and just keep at it, then that's going to make something work. And that's really like, that's what I would say. There's a lot of other sort of warnings or this and that. And the main is the other, and the agent wise, is that you should get an agent. You shouldn't be afraid of agents. Agents are really important, most important relationship that you'll have. And don't be scared of them, and don't be afraid that you'll lose one. If an agent is interested in you, they're not going to run away. If you take your time, or if you ask them questions, or if you look for other agents in a reasonable period of time. Because if they run away, that means they're not interested in you. It's just really important to remember that you have value and your writing has value. And there's a lot of different ways for you to succeed out there. And you are a business. So you got to put on those two different hats. But yeah, I guess there's just so many things to say. But it all sort of boils down to write that good book. And people ask about like when you should go out with the book. When is it ready? Well, it's ready when you don't have anything more to do with it. And I don't mean like line edits. You can always do line edits, but I mean, it's done. Don't rush forward with it. And when you're done with it and you're doing a series, don't go write book 2 while you're getting queries done. There's no need to do that. Go write another book. Go write a novella. Go write a short stories. Write something in a different spot. Because if that first one doesn't sell, or even if it does sell, it's not really necessarily helpful that you have the second book done already. You might have to do a lot of edits that will switch the way it goes. So you should always, don't hoard those ideas. Go write them, and have faith in yourself that you're going to have other ideas and not just one, and keep moving forward. And recognize that you're lucky that you're in an industry that allows success in the short story novelette, which is like, what's a novelette, right? We know what it is, but it's that it exists is crazy. Novella, right. Et cetera, and audio original. Try all these things if you're writing fast. Don't be afraid to. There's stories of success all the way around there, and
good.
Learn by doing.
And don't hoard ideas. I loved that.
Yeah. So on the note of your writing, we would love to hear about. You have a book coming out like here in a week or two, right? A little bit different than what we, our listeners normally think about.
That's what I'm here for. I'm not here for anyone else. I'm here for me.
That's what makes a good agent.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it is sometimes it's a little tricky, right? You cross over, but yeah, no, I write as well. I that's why I've been through this. I have an MFA. I went to England. I got an MFA there. I majored in. I got a certificate in creative writing at a really good school in the States for writing, and so I've been through the realm of this. I know what it feels like. I've had my rejections. I've had my agents, and I know what you're going through. And the first book that I wrote that got me an agent didn't sell, and I know what that's like as well. And then I wrote YA books, and they did sell. And you know what? They're out of print. I'm really proud of them. They're out of print. I can't find them in a store. And we don't often talk about what it feels like. It's not just about getting a book deal. You get a book, people, I just want to get a book deal. It don't matter about the advance or whatever. Well, good on you, right? But like, what happens in 3 years if that book doesn't work and you go into a bookstore and it's not there? And how does that feel? And you got to be ready for those things. And for me, when I wrote my first picture book called 100 Billion Trillion Stars, that was sort of on a lark. A lot of people write picture books on a lark, but I did it because I had an idea and I had a kid coming, and it sort of was thinking about these things, and then it worked and it did well. And now I'm lucky enough to sort of have one of those a year come out. And as you can see, I can't help but tailor this towards being an agent and sort of talking about advice. But even that, like, I've had 5 books at HarperCollins, an imprint called Green Willow, and now I'm shifting to another one. I'm really excited about it, but things change, things shift. It's not static. Things go up and down. You can win awards and then have the book afterwards not work. It all happens. It all happens to all of us. I have all the advantages in the world. I can get blurbs. I know what's going on, and it still is the up and down on it, right? So I know that in some ways that could be negative or scary, but it just means to say it's a bit of a level playing field if you're writing the stuff and you just keep going. You keep hustling. So here's me hustling. This is my book, Bad Drawer, which I'm really excited about. What's fun about this book I really love is that I represent a lot of picture books. I write picture books. I've always been jealous of the people that can write and illustrate together. I think they have the best. Like, think about Where the Wild Things Are, which is one of the best books of all time. if Maurice Sendak wrote that but didn't illustrate it, could he write to his illustrator, okay, now do 3 spreads. That's not 6 pages. Where the wild rumpus, and there's no words on that. Can you just do something there and make those some of the most amazing pages ever? Right? No. So I'm a bad drawer. I'm actually a bad drawer, and I pitched this book to a new publisher, which is Penguin Workshop, part of Penguin Random House. I pitched it as me illustrating it. And then I had some of them are clients, some of them are not. They came in and they do really cool spot illustrations in here. I'll show you. With the idea that right here is Tilly Walden. I'm like, oh, my friend Tilly does. She's so good, and I'm so jealous of these different people. Art, you can't see it, but it's really great. Tilly Walden's this incredible.
We could see that it was good. It clearly is not like the front cover that you drew. Yes,
the front cover of mine is really bad. But I just think it's very fun. So that's the thing, is I pitched it so that I would illustrate it, and the dirty secret is that somewhere in there, after I turned in my first drawings, my publisher was like, listen, you're too bad of a drawer. Like, you can't even hit the notes. They have to put someone else in here to look at it. It was just really funny. So the thing is that there's a spread at the end, which is the big spread. I don't know if I should share it with you guys, but I will anyways. This is all the amazing artists coming together to tell my story in this amazing spread. But right here on the bottom, you can see 2 trees. Those are my trees. That's like all I have in this. Everything else. But it's really, it's fun. I had a lot of fun doing it. And I got to work with the publisher really hands-on with it. And I think that's what's fun, is like you can hear in my voice like the enthusiasm and excitement. I'm not really just pitching the thing. I'm pitching what's behind my head on it and sort of what's fun with it, and working with the publisher and
the story.
How they let me do the layout. And I had a real kick out of it, and it's been a real good time. So whatever. But still, it's like when I think about some of my authors, Mary Robinette Kowal, like one of the reasons why we first connected was because I knew she was a puppeteer, and I was like, oh, why have you done anything with kids? And she came back to me and was like, what if I did a picture book? So her book, Molly on the Moon, which is a picture book, it's like a sci-fi picture book. The science behind it, it's so fascinating. Her notes to the artist was less about, what if I don't like this art or whatever, but more like, no, that's not going to work science-wise. Like, we need to be able to make this realish, right? Of course, it's not fully rendered like 100% science, but a lot of it is. And I love that about that. So you can put yourself into these different worlds and markets, and I think it's really fun. And that's me. That book comes out in October 25th. So there you go. Let's see.
Amazing.
Would love you to
play. Great. Yeah, that was so fun. And in general, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for helping us and all the Hugonauts get a little bit of a view into what's happening sort of behind the curtain of the sci-fi world and just generally the book world in general. It's something we and I think lots of people like love so much, and something we consume and think so much about, but just don't really know how it works behind the scenes. So it's really, really interesting to hear about it.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us. It's a real honor, and I appreciate all the good work you do. And for your listeners, again, I don't want to be a negative, person. I don't mean to be. The enthusiasm is there. And one thing I was going to say is that when you think about your pitch letter and your synopsis, I think it's really important. And this is the last thing I was going to say to this: is that think about how you pitch one of your favorite books. That's not your book. Like, think about the enthusiasm and your voice and the way and the words you use and the emotions you have and how you try and share that to someone else. And when I hear the pitch letter that people give me when they try and do the elevator thing, a lot of times we're like, okay, so here we go. It's like we're in a secondary world with fire breathing, dragon heads, and there's a sort of you go into a robot mode. Don't do that. Like, and throw that passion in there and get always be willing to put yourself on a line along those lines, because you want, like, you're giving yourself, and that's okay. That's amazing. That's what makes your book special. That's what makes it special is how many times, like, I love taking on someone who's made career because I love their books, and that's great. Right. But what I really love is reading someone I've never read before. And I will literally, I'm like, honey, I can't talk to you. Kids, go to bed. I'm getting up and walking in circles around my chair and sitting down, going crazy. And then thinking about the pitch letter already, thinking about who I'm sending it to, thinking about what it's going to be like, how exciting it is. I'm getting goosebumps right now talking about it. And I don't even know what I'm talking about. I don't know what book that is. That's what I want, right? And you right here have it. Like, you have that for me. So send it to me, right? I want it. Now, it's hard for me to get to it, but I want it. So bring it on. Bring it on. And that's what's going to make these things work, right? It's that. It's like that enthusiasm that you have, your piece of you that comes to us being everyone, right? That's so you're, you know, you've got it. Bring that specialness, bring it on. And thanks for letting me share that with everyone. I appreciate it. I like to babble, but I think it's important for them to hear that. So,
yeah.
That's amazing.
We love the enthusiasm.
Every writer needs to hear that. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. Good luck with the Halloween party, and we will. We'll talk soon. Thanks again for coming on.
Me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Later, Seth.
Bye.